The United States is a nation that garners an environment where children can be immersed in so many different religious opportunities. Across the country are more communities of different religions than any other place in the world, and this allows the religious education of so many to be so developed and unique. You can grow up with people in any religion as neighbors, schoolmates, or close friends, and this is so important for understanding development, both in becoming a curious person and evolving spiritually. My mother was born to a Lutheran mother and father, but with many Jewish friends and relatives, as her mom had a deep Jewish ancestry. In fact, the area in which my mom grew up in was more overwhelmingly Jewish than Christian. Pictured here is Bethel Lutheran Church, where my mom went to church as a kid, and Beth Israel Conservative Synagogue, where most of her friends went to synagogue. And now you will hear her talk about what her upbringing was like in this environment.
So it was a very interesting dynamic there because my friends were educating me in terms of the ways in which their community and their culture was really minoritized in the space of the Midwest and actually the country and the world as a whole. I remember when my best friend Miriam asked me when we were 10 years old probably if there were another Holocaust, if I would hide her and her family in our house. And I remember that being really, really striking to me and really kind of drove home I didn't understand it this way at the time, but the privilege that I had in being part of very much of a majority culture.
My mom then went to St. Olaf College for undergraduate, and that's where her point of view really changed.
And it was there that I just suddenly, again, it was so much more homogenous. Most of the people in that community were Lutheran, and I suddenly started feeling some of the oppressiveness of the institution itself, and was running into, a lot of hypocrisy. And really it was through that process of kind of coming to terms with this Lutheran campus and Lutheran culture that I moved away from there. And it was around that time too that I ended up studying liberation theology and did an abroad program in Mexico. And I realized what I was drawn to in religion was really the activism and the community support, which was something that I know that my Jewish friends and that community had really instilled in me, a really strong social justice component that I certainly had lost the thread of in terms of Protestant Christianity.
So in college, my mom kind of turned from Christianity and instead moved to just understanding her own spirituality. And pictured here is our shed, which she now uses as a kind of spiritual haven for herself. She is now going to talk about her spiritual journey after college.
So, yes, so I was doing my graduate work, my PhD in English, and traveling a lot in South America. By that time, I had, Christianity was like out of my life. I would have considered myself very agnostic, spiritual still though, and kind of trying to understand that. But it wasn't, it wasn't something that I was struggling with. There was never a time when I was like, oh my God, I have left the church, or like, I don't believe in God. I didn't sort of grapple in that way. And I think in part because my mom was never dogmatic. But I remember, I think I had finished my PhD, wanted to do some more traveling, but I decided that I made this very specific decision that I had been doing all of my traveling in South American and Catholic countries, and I decided that I wanted to go to a country that decidedly did not practice Catholicism, because one of the things that was oppressive for me traveling in South America was the gender dynamics. And I was curious and wondered what it would be like to travel in a more Buddhist and Hindu culture. And so I decided to go to Nepal. And so I spent a month in Nepal trekking, and just was super, super compelled by, I was trekking in a part of the country that was very close to Tibet. And it was this area in the Annapurna region where there was a intersection and confluence of Hinduism and Buddhism. Um, and again, I'm really interested in kind of borderlands, these liminal spaces. So there were a lot of different languages, but Nepali and Tibetan were both spoken there. It was kind of a region for trade. And when I was up in that part of the country, I went to a lot of temples that were mostly Tibetan Buddhist temples, and got blessed by some lamas who would bless Western trekkers as, folks were moving through. But it was just it was a very, very impactful experience for me, and got to know some Nepali folks because I ended up trekking with two Westerners who spoke fluent Nepali. And one of them was an anthropologist who had been working in the country for a long time, and the other one actually had lived in Nepal for about 10 years. She had been in the Peace Corps. So we just had a lot of kind of really nice inroads to meeting with community members and talking to folks and kind of knowing the culture when we entered a Buddhist temple and things like that.
So, my mom eventually did become a psychotherapist, and she relates a lot of what she works on to Buddhism itself.
University professor and also a psychotherapist, but my orientation to psychotherapy, I went into a clinical program in phenomenological and existential psychology, and because I didn't want to do something that was like strictly sort of APA psychology, and so the existential component of it really, and the phenomenological, really connected me even more deeply to Buddhism, which I would say, if there's any spiritual guiding principle, it would be Buddhism.
From growing up Lutheran to learning about Judaism through her friends to trekking in Nepal and meeting Buddhist monks, my mom was exposed to so many different ways of being spiritual. This variety of religion helped introduce her to social justice, working as a psychotherapist, and coming to terms with her place in the world. She now adopts a Buddhist way of looking at the world, and while I don't identify as a Buddhist, this mindset has influenced my upbringing as well. Living with a mother who has this much religious background has changed the way I view any new religion I come across, as I understand that there are different ways to be spiritual. It's made me realize that there is no one right way to have faith. I believe it has made me and my mom more understanding and accepting people in the world around us, as my mom's past put her into contact with others around the world who have very different beliefs. As her son, she has taught me so much about understanding and being curious about our differences. Thank you so much for listening.